stand by for action.
Thanks for joining me. My name is Dave Miller. I am the Unpleasant Blind Guy. We're going to go through a murder case that concluded late last year, highlight some of its effects, implications, what cases like it mean for society, and what we as a society should do to help prevent more of these. On March the 3rd of 2014, I did a show called Practice Love. Here's some of that. It's become a worldwide phenomenon that people can regularly speak with each other and form friendship relationships and sometimes even more over the internet. And those of us with any kind of experience have friends that we regularly enjoy interacting with and who we enjoy see pop up in whatever social media we're on. And when they pass on, we miss them very much. The one that I'm referring to was named Practice Theory on the Twitter. He was part of the Small G Gay Report family and also part of the Red Eye Twitter crew. He would come on with us and have fun, joke around, and you could always count on Practice Theory to tweet something amusing or thoughtful or just plain fun. His tweets were always welcome, and I considered him to be a friend in my life. Now, last Sunday, Practice Theory was taking his nightly walk when 3 individuals robbed a restaurant that was about a block away from where he was. They then approached him and tried to rob him of his cell phone. He ran and called 911, and they shot and killed him and ran off. This all happened in the Greenwood area of Seattle. One of them was captured on Friday trying to board a plane and leave town. I have detailed stories of this that I will post at UBG Contact on the Twitter. That's where you can contact me with story suggestions, awesome American suggestions, questions, and comments. Practice Theory's name was David Peterson. He was my age, 54. He's survived by a wife who is a very wonderful person, and by a son, a grown son. David was a U.S. Army veteran, retired military police officer, and even though he was 54, he was hardly a man slowing down. He was actually continuing his education in information technology and was looking forward to improving his life. David was buried this Saturday. As you might guess, his death affected all of us on Twitter. I personally found out last Tuesday, and such an impression was the one that David left that his friends on Twitter began to immediately voice their condolences and hopes that his murderers would be found soon and that justice would be done. By March the 10th, when I did the show Practice Hope, we knew more. Now, there have been some details in this case. Mainly, we found out that the accused is 17 years old and that his main concern, as he was relating the details of the murder to his friends, was that David Peterson's cell phone, for which he had killed him, was an older model. He was disappointed in that. He showed no remorse at killing Mr. Peterson, only that he had killed him for an older model cell phone. Then, as the saying goes, it went quiet. Though many of us on Twitter knew Mr. Peterson's widow, many of us also recognized that when someone has suffered a loss, particularly a loss of this nature, sometimes the best thing that those who care can do is to offer support, love, and then back off so that that bereaved person can deal with their grief and begin to get on with their life. The murderer having been caught, we believed that eventually we would hear of a conclusion to this case. But time passed, and many of us heard nothing. Within the past week, while discussing the recent accidental death of our friend Gwen Truax, or Gwen in Alaska, as she was known to us in the Red Eye Twitter feed and to those on the Dennis Miller chat board, the DMZ, that concern that we all had for David's widow and our curiosity as to the conclusion of this murder case came under discussion. After some digging, I found the rest of the story. And while we always held David's widow and his family in our hearts, we had lost track of this case and it is true with those who are not directly involved with these proceedings. We had no idea what David's widow was going through, but you can get some idea from this story filed on September the 26th, 2014, by Maria Guerrero of KIRO-TV, Channel 7, Seattle, Washington. Now, when you look at this story at UBG Contact on Twitter, do make note of the headline that KIRO-TV used. Widow of random homicide victim is part of that headline. This seemed to be a theme of a lot of the local press coverage of this case. The impression was given that, well, this was a shooting that just happened. Trouble is, the facts don't bear that out. Also note that while the murder of David Peterson took place on February the 23rd, 2014, this hearing was taking place on September the 26th, 2014.
The widow of a Seattle man murdered for his cell phone says she's tired of waiting for her husband's killer to go to trial. KIRO 7 has been covering this case since February. Today, the widow told our KIRO 7's Maria Guerrero why she thinks the defense is stalling.
This was the second time Kimberly Peterson had to see her husband's accused killer in court, but she said it was necessary.
I need to show up and get the wheels of justice turning.
Mr. White was present in custody.
In court, the judge ordered us not show Byron White's face. The now 18-year-old seen in this previous hearing is accused of shooting and killing David Peterson in February.
People do note the kid glove treatment that this murderer received, the judge solicitously ordering the television station not to show his face. And remember, at this point, Byron White was 18 years old. He was an adult, certainly old enough for the public to see the face of an accused murderer.
Yeah, I'm sure it's the defense's goal to put this out as long as possible, hoping that the witnesses are going to drop out of the case.
Despite the defense asking for a continuance until mid-December, the case is moving forward sooner. It is little consolation for this widow seeking justice.
It just hurts my heart. It hurts my heart that someone could just take a life like that without any remorse whatsoever.
The point. What distinguished this murder case all along from all of the other murders that sadly routinely take place in the United States of America each year. The fact that Byron White, with absolutely no empathy for the life of David Peterson, was prepared to kill him. And why? Because he wanted Mr. Peterson's cell phone, and Mr. Peterson resisted and then called police. White told his friends that Mr. Peterson had seen his face, so he had to kill him. All for a cell phone that Byron White complained was not a nice enough model. And the system ground forward, as it does, affording Mr. White all of his rights, while Mr. Peterson's widow and family suffered, waiting until November the 9th, 2015, for Byron White to be sentenced. His sentence? 28.5 years imprisonment. And what was the headline in the Seattle Times reporting this? Former Ballard High student gets nearly 30 years for killing Greenwood man over cell phone. Now, to their credit, the Seattle Times did point out the motivation for Mr. White's murder of Mr. Peterson. But in their article, they still somehow make it sound as if Byron White was the victim. The criminal justice system in the Seattle area operated to the best efficiency that it could for the state of Washington. After Mr. Peterson's widow spoke to the judge issued, according to the Seattle Times story, the stiffest punishment he could. People, our society has to do better. Byron White's murder of Mr. Peterson cannot be excused by saying that Mr. White had a lack of opportunity. He played varsity football at his high school, and trust me, anyone who's been to an American high school knows varsity football players receive preferential treatment. Age cannot excuse this crime. Ask yourselves how many 17-year-old ISIS and Boko Haram soldiers there are, and then go do the research. You'll find there are plenty. This murder can't be excused by the proliferation of firearms or by some argument about skin color or social justice. It's as simple as this. If we're being honest, Byron White is a sociopath who felt he was entitled to whatever he wanted. Mr. Peterson was a man who served his country in the United States military, and then as a civilian routinely bought shoes for homeless men he met on the street. So what caused this contrast of characters between an enabled sociopath and a man of service just out for a walk one evening? People, the first 2 shows I did about this case were called Practice Hope and Practice Love. I think it's time for our society to begin to practice sense. For decades now, the family unit has been disparaged, fatherhood has been made a laughingstock, and more excuses for the kinds of acts that deprive families of their fathers and husbands are made each year by government representatives, so-called learned individuals in academia, and agenda-driven propagandists in our entertainment industry and popular press. It's time for our people to understand that actions have consequences, that it does matter when we do things to each other that cause harm, and when those things are done, our society is obligated to mete out punishment that is swift and vigorous. This is not harsh treatment. This is not cruelty. This is sense. The kind of sense, when practiced, can actually save our civilization. We can do it if we will admit that our young people have the ability to take responsibility for their own actions. If we are willing to say that parents must parent, and that job belongs to both mothers and involved fathers. In short, we can do it if we are prepared to practice sense. I rarely try to speak for others, but I believe that I can speak on behalf of David's friends in the Red Eye Twitter feed when I say that, Seeley, as we loved David for his humor and for himself, we extend that love to you and your family and wish you all happiness and healing for the rest of your days. That's it for this time. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for listening, and may your God go with you. Goodbye. The Unpleasant Blind Guy is copyright 2016 Anno Domini.